Picture the starving caveman, gaunt, desperate, one bad hunt away from death, gorging on mammoth meat only to starve for weeks until the next lucky kill. It's the image built into decades of textbooks and documentaries. It's also, according to the actual data, mostly wrong. This isn't a small correction. This idea became the foundation of a major scientific theory used to explain the modern obesity and diabetes epidemic. The claim that our bodies are still braced for a famine that, for most of us, is never coming. But when researchers finally sat down and tested whether hunter-gatherers actually experienced more frequent or severe famine than the societies that followed them, the answer was no. If anything, they experienced less. Let's break down what really happened. Because it changes a theory, a huge amount of modern medicine was quietly built on top of. A landmark cross-cultural study set out to test the core assumption behind the constant starvation myth. What it found, hunter-gatherers did face lean periods, usually seasonal, sometimes tied to local disruptions, but multi-year, mass mortality famines were rare. Serious shortages might hit a given environment once every few decades, and built-in social mechanisms usually kept them from spiraling into disaster. Early farming societies tell a very different story. Crop failures could trigger real famine in almost any bad drought year, and recurring multi-year subsistence crises were common, especially once storage systems and inequality both increased at the same time, concentrating risk in a way foraging life never did. The archaeological record backs this up clearly. Frequent crop failures and documented famines run throughout agricultural history, while comparable large-scale famine events among hunter-gatherers are strikingly rare. So why does the constant starvation myth persist? Partly because farming looks like obvious progress, making it counterintuitive to imagine the older lifestyle was actually more food secure, and partly because the thrifty gene hypothesis, built directly on the assumption of ancestral feast and famine cycles, became so influential in medical research that almost nobody rigorously questioned it for decades. We'll come back to that. If hunter-gatherers weren't constantly on the edge of starvation, what were they actually doing? A toolkit of overlapping strategies, each covering for the other's weaknesses. Strategy 1. Dietary breadth. Hunter-gatherers pulled from meat, fish, nuts, tubers, fruit, shellfish, and wild grains simultaneously. If the hunt failed, there were still tubers, nuts, shellfish. Compare that to farmers, who concentrated almost their entire calorie intake into one or two staple crops. Efficient in good years, catastrophic the moment one crop failed. If you're enjoying this rethink of ancient life, subscribing helps a ton. There's a lot more of what we assumed versus what's actually true coming. Strategy 2. Mobility. Foragers weren't tied to one plot of land. When conditions turned bad, they simply moved. Something farmers, invested in fields, irrigation, and granaries, could no longer do. Strategy 3, and maybe the cleverest, social structure. Successful hunters shared their kills widely, creating a web of reciprocity that functioned like biological insurance. Feed the group today, and the group feeds you during your own future dry spell. Researchers modeling these networks found they organize in layered waves outward from successful hunters, meaning the group's survival never depended on any one hunter's luck holding. It's risk pooling, the same principle behind modern insurance, built into social norms instead of paperwork. Strategy 4. Scavenging. Long dismissed as a primitive, embarrassing fallback, now recognized by researchers as a smart, deliberate, energy-efficient strategy. Strong stomach acid let early humans safely eat partially decomposed meat. Long-distance walking let them reach carcasses before competitors stripped them clean. And fire plus tools let them extract fat and marrow other scavengers simply couldn't access. Scavenging wasn't a last resort. It was just one more reliable card in the deck. Now, what happens inside the body when food actually does run out? It's not a simple shutdown. It's a structured, multi-stage sequence built by evolution to stretch survival as long as possible. In the first day or two, the body burns glycogen and ramps up glucose production from other sources just to keep the brain fueled. After that, it shifts into ketogenesis, burning stored fat for fuel instead of muscle, while metabolic rate itself drops to conserve energy. By day 4 or 5, the body settles into a sustainable fat-burning state that can sustain a person for over a month if lean, or over a year with substantial fat reserves. This elegant machinery is exactly what inspired the Thrifty gene hypothesis in the 1960s, the idea that genes for efficient fat storage were selected for by regular ancestral famine, and that those same genes now drive modern obesity in a world of abundance. It's tidy, intuitive, and dominated the field for decades. But here's the twist: the famine frequency research directly undercuts it. If hunter-gatherers weren't experiencing the kind of frequent, population-thinning famine the theory requires, the whole foundation gets shaky. Researchers like Jonathan Speakman have proposed an alternative. Maybe fat storage genes weren't actively selected for at all, but simply drifted freely once an earlier pressure, predators picking off the slowest, heaviest individuals, disappeared roughly 2 million years ago, thanks to fire, weapons, and group defense. No famine required to explain the pattern we see today. So how did ancient humans really handle hunger? Not through constant white-knuckle survival, through dietary flexibility, mobility, social risk pooling, underrated scavenging, and an elegantly sequenced metabolic backup system for when scarcity did hit. The real twist isn't that they survived hunger cleverly. It's that they may have been better at avoiding it altogether than the farmers, or even some modern populations, who came after them.